Hello and welcome to Keepin, a comic hero. So we're going to be picking up on the second tie-in issue of Wolverine's version of Blood Hunt, telling you all that you need to know about this one to kind of keep you caught up on the series. Also, if you have not checked out my first issue breakdown of this series, you should definitely go do so after this video. Now, if we remember, at the very end of issue number 1, we found out who was behind this whole National Guard and military soldier vampires that were going after Wolverine. And we found out that it was Maverick, who was is Wolverine's like old military pal, who had also been now turned into a vampire. Now, Maverick's plan is to get Wolverine on his side to use him as his main weapon and being able to fight this vampire versus vampire war. Because the whole idea here is that once Blade defeats the Avengers, defeats the heroes with his blood coven, that it's just gonna be vampires left and it's gonna be vampire eat all, right? So he wants Wolverine on his side so that he will be able to climb to the top and be king of the mountain of vampires, if you want to look at it that way. Now, Wolverine alongside Louise here, aka Night Guard, whom he had reached out to in the very last issue after Blade had gotten control over the Dark Force and then used them to like turn the lights out on the entire world. So the rest of the Merc soldiers that were after Wolverine and Louise at the very end of the issue, they are going to town on them. Now, this area where they're at, right, is like the north of Long Beach, California, as is mentioned here. And Wolverine takes one of the guns, right? Like after he's like dusting these fools, like slashing their heads off, you know, Louise is doing her thing, like kicking ass as well. Like he takes this gun and takes down this drone that Maverick was using to watch this entire fight. Now, shortly after this, Wolverine calls in a favor from Bannister. Now, Bannister, if we remember, is a CIA agent who was giving him intel in the very last issue. So he calls in a favor, like Bennett. So Wolverine calls in a favor to Bannister, and then Banner calls in a favor to like one of his Air Force buddies that then sends out this drone in and blows the Merc soldiers up, like just blows them up completely, just so that Louise and Wolverine would be able to escape. But before they escape, Bannister lets them know, or like finally like reveals to them, who's been behind the whole Dark Force chaos in the first place. It has caused this entire world to go pitch black, and it is Blade. Now, if you've been reading the main Blood Hunt issue, you already knew that Blade was behind this, right? But our guy Wolverine had no freaking clue what was going on. So he's finding this out just now. And this shook homeboy up a little bit, but it really actually shakes up Louise a little bit too, because she actually mentions this a little bit later on. Like she was like, I used to look up to Blade, right? Like Blade was like the standard. As a daywalker vampire, he was the standard. Fierce vampire hunter who used to go and you know, wreak justice, right? And then when Louise had turned into a vampire herself, she was like, he was even more of an inspiration to me, right? Because he would thinking about how hard it is to stave off your thirst for human blood, like all of this, right? So she really, really looked up to him. So the fact that he's now behind this whole Dark Force chaos thing and this vampire uprising, it's very hard for her to kind of stomach that. Now, after they had escaped though, right? We see Maverick, who had a backup drone and was actually able to see Wolverine not die. Now he's here talking to this lady that's in a red dress with like red fingernails, which I'm not gonna lie to you, look kind of sexy. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Let's move on. Now this is Alyssa. She's a vampire and a former leader of the Siren Sect Vampire Clan. Damn it, that was a mouthful. Which is an all-female line of seductress vampires, right? Now she's telling Maverick, listen, my guy, you better make sure that you get Wolverine. I don't care about your promises, right? I work with deeds getting done. And all you've been giving me right now is promises. Because when Blade is done fighting, this is what she's telling him, like when Blade is done fighting all the heroes, this dude's gonna be tired and he's gonna be weakened from all of it. That is when we strike. And either way, she's gonna be queen of the vampires. And it's your choice, Maverick, whether or not you are going to be a king with me, right? So she puts it all in this court, like, you better get the job done. You better, you know, get Wolverine here on our side. Now, one thing that I found to be interesting is that later on, when Wolverine and Louise were talking about Blade being the one behind the Dark Force and Maverick trying to get Wolverine on his side, he stated that something's like off with this whole Blade leading this charge. Like it seems very out of character for him. And I agree. Like I've been saying that since reading the first issue of Blood Hunt here, the main line, I'm like, this seems really weird. Like, this is not really who Blade is, right? And he even mentions that, like, as it pertains to Maverick is not really like a power trip guy. Like, Maverick is more of like, hey, let me get some money type of guy, right? Let me use this to my advantage to get some money. You know, so it's kind of weird that he would just be following Alyssa and being on this power trip. Like, it's kind of sus is basically what he's saying. And I think he's definitely onto something, at least where Maverick is concerned, because one of Alyssa's abilities is that she has clairvoyance, which can hypnotize and mind control others. So I'm wondering if she could potentially be controlling Maverick. And I'm wondering, to a certain extent, is there someone that's also probably controlling Blade as well? Like, I guarantee you that's probably where this is all going to lead, right? Now, as it pertains to Wolverine and Louise, Bannister had given them intel that the National Guard vampire soldiers, another mouthful, that they were going to be over at the port of Long Beach. So we see some of these Merc soldiers again at the port, right? Loading up these ships with civilians. And if we remember from the last issue, that Wolverine has stated or started off at the bar, right? And the bar was in Barstow, which was a very vacant bar. There was nobody around. There was nobody in the town entirely. The whole town was vacant. So these civilians, I'm assuming, is from, you know, Barstow. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to my guy right here, Big Dan, as he calls himself. So this man right here, he spits on one of the vampires, right? And while the soldier is trying to go after Big Dan to attack him back, Louise fires an arrow right into this dude's mouth, taking his punk ass out. So then Wolverine tells Big Dan, listen, my guy, we in this now. You get the civilians out of this place. So Louise and then Wolverine start making quick work of these fools. And I gotta say, man, watching Wolverine stab people in the head with his claws and seeing the blood on his claws as well, it is quite the sight to behold. And Louise is doing her thing too, like that UV cannon gun with the blue U on it, that UV cannon machete, or as we would say in Jamaica, the machete. It's kind of sexy, guys. I love seeing some of these fight scenes here. So then Wolverine and Louise, they look to take this boat after this fight's done, right? They look to take this boat to see if they can go and find Maverick's base in Santa Cruz, because one of the soldiers had mentioned something about Santa Cruz. So they blow up a ship before they go. And when they are on their way to Santa Cruz, actually, when they got to Santa Cruz Island, they see a cave, which looks like a perfect hideout for vampires, right? As Louise had mentioned. But as they approach it, there's like this current, this wave current that is coming right towards them, which to their surprise are these Aqueous vampires. I have no idea how to pronounce that correctly. Aqueous vampires. Listen, they're basically sea monster vampires, okay? That's what they are. They're sea monster vampires, and that's where this issue ends and says to be continued. What a effing cliffhanger, right? So I don't know. I'm curious to see where this goes, guys. I feel like the more and more that we go down this hole, though, that they're gonna find a way to turn Wolverine into a vampire, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, guys. I really am not. But let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think about this issue so far? What do you think about this series? It's been fun. I'm enjoying seeing a lot of the massacring from, you know, from Wolverine and of course Louise, like taking out these vampires. But I don't know how I'm gonna feel, man, when they finally turn Wolverine into a vampire, because I guarantee that's gonna happen, and we're gonna have a long talk about this. But we're gonna be covering more Blood Hunt topics. Let me know, by the way, if you want me to cover any other Blood Hunt topics. We're probably gonna cover the second issue here of Black Panther as well, and probably stick a little bit more so with the main lines. But appreciate you guys watching the video. Thank you so much for kicking it, guys, with Keeping It Comic. Bye.